let me start by with a build-up, right? Ukraine has always been considered a very rich, prosperous, and wonderful area. And I will read you a passage from a depiction of a 16th century traveler, a French traveler that has created a depiction of Ukraine for us. Okay? Ukraine is the promised land which God had promised to the Jewish nation. It is filled with honey and milk. Those who went to Ukraine cannot be separated from it because it attracts every person as magnet attracts steel. The Ukrainian sky laughs and calls people to itself. You can see trees growing everywhere. They have fruits on them. In the old trees, there are tons of bees and other such animals. There's loads of game that you can find, and wild horses and deer that are just killed for their wonderful skin, and so forth and so forth. A really rich description of a land that is full of wonderful animals, wonderful types of trees, fruit. It's plentiful, it's bountiful. It's basically described as heaven, right? And now let's see what I'm trying to lead up to with this little build up, okay? And what I am trying to build up to is this. The Brussels Times. European Parliament votes for recognition of ecocide. Commission still hesitant. I don't think many people are talking about the environmental cost of this war, of the devastation that Russia is basically doing to Ukrainian land, of the whole animal species that are being killed off. You can see it on the photo here, right? European Parliament continues to push for the recognition of ecocide in EU legislation with a vote on Monday in the Parliament's Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, in favor of including ecocide in the revised EU directive on the protection of the environment through criminal law. This was the fourth committee out of 5 committees to support the recognition of ecocide in previous votes. The proposal has been backed by the committees on environment, development, and petitions. The Legal Affairs Committee, which is in charge of the file, is expected to vote on it later this month. So what we are going to discuss here is the very big environmental cost that Ukraine is having to shoulder because of this war. And it's especially important because Ukraine, this region, has been known as the breadbasket of Europe, and probably more for hundreds of years, really. The final text will then go on to the plenary of the European Parliament and will be followed negotiations between all 3 institutions, the Parliament, the Council, and the Commission. We're getting closer and closer, step by step, to obtaining from the European Parliament a firm position in favor of the recognition of the crime of ecocide, commented French MEP Marie Toussaint, Greens AFA, founder of Ecocide Alliance. The issue is urgent and takes on new importance in light of Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine. The only major political group in the parliament still resisting the proposal in the centre-right European is the central-right European People's Party, EPP, but a growing number of its members now want the crime of ecocide to be enshrined in European law, she says. According to the proposal, ecocide will be sentenced with up to 10 years in prison and fines of between 12 and 25% of the annual turnover of the involved companies. There will be no limitation of time to prosecute ecocide. She also referred to the recent votes at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The Assembly adopted 2 decisions calling for the recognition of ecocide as a crime in international and national legislation and to amend the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court as proposed by the Stop Ecocide Foundation in June 2021. The decisions deal in particular with the damage to environment in armed conflicts such as Russia's war against Ukraine. Ukraine has suffered high levels of environmental damage in many forms over the last year due to Russia's attacks, destroying forests, ruining agricultural fields, and polluting rivers. The issues of ecocide was also mentioned in the joint statement at the end of the EU-Ukraine summit in Kyiv last Friday. The EU expressed, among others, its support to Ukraine's 10-point peace plan from November last year. Also, by the way, as you can see, Ukraine is not opposed to the negotiation table. Ukraine does have a 10-point peace plan. One of the points in the plan is the prevention of ecocide and the need for protecting the environment, which has been severely damaged and contaminated during the war. Until now, the European Commission has been reluctant to include ecocide as an international crime in the revised EU directive on the protection of the environment and to support the initiative to amend the statutes of International Criminal Court. Asked whether the joint statement with Ukraine implied that it had changed its position, a Commission source told the Brussels Times that its position remained unchanged. The Commission will keep supporting Ukraine in its efforts to investigate environmental crimes committed in its territory by Russia. The source added, "We are aware of the live vote, but have no further comments on this point at this stage." So this is one thing that I wanted to bring your attention to. And this is the other thing. The silent victim. Ukraine counts war's cost for nature. Right? We have the human cost of war. We have the war crimes committed on humans. But we've also got war crimes committed against the environment itself, right? Investigations are underway in the hope this is the first conflict in which a full reckoning is made of environmental crimes. First conflict in which a full reckoning is made of environmental crimes. That is the hope. Toxic smoke, contaminated rivers, poisoned soil, trees reduced to charred stumps, nature reserves poked with craters. The environmental toll for Russia's war with Ukraine, which has been detailed in a new map, might once have been considered incalculable. Keep in mind, this is an important topic because, for example, the war in Vietnam, the one that ended up being the war that the US had entered, the environmental cost of the Vietnam War is felt to this day. To this day, Vietnamese soil is riddled with mines. To this day, Vietnamese land is poisoned with the infamous orange G substance, right? So it is important for us to discuss such things. But extensive investigations by Ukrainian scientists, conservationists, bureaucrats, and lawyers are now underway to ensure this is the first conflict in which a full reckoning is made of environmental crimes, so the aggressor can be held to account for compensation claimed that currently stands at more than 50 billion? BN is billion, right? Agent Orange didn't just kill people. Agent Orange also caused newborn babies to be deformed. And also Agent Orange has caused the soil itself to be polluted and unusable. There's a big project underway with cooperation with Japan to hopefully clean the Vietnamese soil. When I visited Vietnam, I read brochures about the technology, about the plan to clean the soil from Agent Orange. And it's still a thing that's going to be completed years into the future from now. So that is a thing to consider, right? That a big project has been set in place to clean up Vietnam from Agent Orange. Well, we don't consider the fact that we do not consider environment much is actually the reason why we are where we are when it comes to global warming, right? It is a very important reason why we are where we are. So it stands at more than 50 billion or 42 billion pounds. $50 billion, 42 billion pounds. The Environment Ministry has set up a hotline for citizens to report cases of Russian ecocide, which so far number 2,303 and issues weekly updates of the tally. The latest edition estimates that in the past year, right? Ukraine has had to absorb or neutralize the impact of 320.104 explosive devices. Because the corporations have legit rights in USA, we should give the earth legal rights in the USA as well. True, unironically. Almost one-third of the country, 174,000 square kilometers, remains potentially dangerous, right? Debris includes 230,000 tons of scrap metal from 3,000 destroyed Russian tanks and other military equipment, right? 160 nature reserves, 16 wetlands, and 2 biospheres are under threat of destruction. A large number of mines in the Black Sea threaten shipping and marine animals. 600 species of animals and 880 species of plants are under threat of extinction. A third of Ukrainian land is uncultivated or unavailable for agriculture. Up to 40% of arable land is not available for cultivation. Altogether, The losses from land, water, and air pollution amounted to 51.4 billion, estimated Alexander Stavnichuk, the deputy head of the Department of Environmental Control and Methodology at recent workshops in Kiev. In part, this is effective wartime propaganda. At a time of heightened climate sensibilities, the Ukrainian government knows it can win hearts and minds by reminding the outside world that it is an environmentally conscious, food producing, forward thinking democracy that has been defiled by a fossil fuel dictatorship that pays as little respect to nature as it does to the sovereignty of its neighbors. Hopefully, they get billions of US dollars in help. This damage needs to be repaired, true. And we need to be more aware of this, outside of the scope of this war. Like, I saw a very troubling documentary about gold mines, for example, that cause pollution to the ground, to the water, to everything, that nearby villagers get blind because of it. We should discuss this sort of things much more. But the implications of opening this new environmental legal front are further reaching. It is also part of a broader and very modern battle that aims to tap scientific research, information technology, communication strategies, and groundbreaking lawsuits in a way that puts a higher value on nature than most nations have recognized until now. So, what I would like to see is to have not just countries that commit war crimes against nature to be held accountable. I want to see companies, corporations that commit crimes against nature to be held accountable, because crimes against nature very often also translate into direct harm against people that live near the places where those crimes are being committed. It is almost certainly the most detailed tally of wartime environmental destruction ever undertaken. Oh, we are seeing a mention of Vietnam War. This is very important because a huge devastation of the environment was done in the Vietnam War. The US government should pay for Agent Orange and the Gulf War. Yeah. During the Vietnam War, there was an outcry over the use of Agent Orange defoliants. And it's very, very, justified outcry. I've already told you, the land is still poisoned by Agent Orange. When I visited Vietnam, I saw victims of Agent Orange. When me and my friend, we went for a organized trip, a bus trip to certain parts of Vietnam, and on the way to those places, there is a stop that the bus takes. And this stop is like a knitting slash sewing workshop that is victims of Agent Orange hand weave things for tourists to buy. You know, they hand weave objects for tourists to buy. They are people that were born deformed, heavily deformed, due to Agent Orange. And this sort of stop, this sort of facility is used to give people who were born deformed a an occupation and a chance for them to be able to earn a living for themselves, you know? But the harm of Agent Orange is visible to this day, you know? we have gone to that stop and I have seen the sort of the place where people sue and those I will tell you right now the because they sort of sue patterns sort of on things and those patterns are incredible. They actually create incredible art in that place. But that's a whole different topic. It is incredible art. Okay. So in the Gulf War, considerable attention was focused on the burning of oil wells, but there has been nothing with the same range and ambition as the hodgepodge assessments now underway by civil society, universities, and the government. Those involved in this collective intelligence operation would not normally be classified as combatants, but much of their work requires considerable courage. The gutted remains of a car in front of damaged trees following a battle between Russia and Ukrainian forces on the outskirts of Chernihiv in April 2022, photographed by Petros Giannakouris, AP. You can see that, like, this is the thing that is not talked about when it comes to war. And it's a thing that I've actually been saying for a long time now. Even if Russia is not winning per se, even if Russia is not able to meet any of its goals, you always have to keep in mind that all of the devastation is happening in Ukraine and to Ukraine. This sort of devastation, the environmental devastation, even if Russia is not winning, the the devastation is happening, you know? We continue. Katerina Polyanska is a young landscape ecologist who travels the country taking samples from bomb craters and photographs of environmental damage in national parks. This requires trips close to conflict zones and areas that have not yet been cleared of unexpected ordnance. So, in other words, those are people that do not take part in the fighting itself, but they risk their lives to document the harm done to the environment. They risk being blown up by mines. They even risk being shot if they come to an act near a active war zone. You know? And I think people like that are very important. People that come to very dangerous places to document things. Document things like harm to the environment, or people like Dylan Burns that go and document the harm that is done to the refugees. Because Dylan went to talk to the refugees and to also document the war. The dangers are very real. On one trip, she came across a fox that had been killed by a mine. On another, she could hear the sound of nearby shelling, but she feels the risk is worth taking. And I think the risk is worth taking as well. Last year, I started doing this investigation by computer using only satellite images, but I decided I needed to see it with my own eyes. She said, war is not just about direct impacts. It is also the destruction of our nature and environment. And I will add, the environmental destruction of a country is a thing that impacts more than just that country. It is very, very important to remember. You know, environment affects us all. At first, she was afraid to enter the craters, some of which are more than 3 meters deep. But after she had done 20, she jokes that she became a crater connoisseur. This is why I think that a segment like this is important as well. Like when I saw this, when I have gotten an email about this, I decided that this is actually an important topic to cover. And I don't really see many people covering the war, discussing this particular aspect of it. I really don't see many people talking about it. And I'm hoping maybe more people will start talking about the environmental toll, because the environmental toll will be a thing that will take years and years and years to undo after the year will already have been over. Just like Vietnam, a lot of the damage in Vietnam has not been undone, even though there's a lot of work being done in order to do it. You know? The environmental cost of the war in Ukraine. Hotspots among the thousands of ecological crimes reported since Russia's invasion. Industrial clusters, ecological hotspots, oil depot fires and explosions, river systems, nuclear sites. Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. River systems. Oil depot fires and explosions. Here, basically all around the country. Ecological hotspots here. The samples are sent back to a laboratory where they are tested for toxic chemicals such as white phosphorus. This is necessary to decide how to rehabilitate the land and whether to advise local people to avoid potentially contaminated streams. Some areas, she said, were charred, while others looked like moon landscapes. Among the most shocking environmental destruction was the bombing of ancient chalk slopes, a unique ecosystem in the Holy Mountain National Park. When you see the craters there, you know it will never recover. Never. The chalk slopes were formed over 100 million years and then destroyed in 1 year of war. The worst damage is not always visible. It is not just the explosive material, it is rocket fuel and shrapnel and wire. All these little tiny pieces of pollution have a huge impact on nature. You can't imagine the scale of the impact. Most of her work focuses on assessing damage and potential hazards for people and nature, but rehabilitation and recompense play a part too. Polyanska works for the Environmental People Law Organization, which brings together scientists and lawyers. They, like other civil society and government bodies in Ukraine, are building legal cases against Russia in the International Criminal Court under Article 8 of the Rome Statute, which covers ecological crimes. In addition, the Geneva Convention forbids methods or means of warfare that are intended to cause or may be expected to cause widespread, lasting, and severe damage to the natural environment. Some legal scholars and environmentalists hope Ukraine can push international law a step further by securing recognition of ecocide for crimes against the living natural world. This term, popularized by the British environmental lawyer Polly Higgins, has not yet been defined in international law, but Ukraine is one of several former Soviet bloc countries that have passed ecocide legislation. This is already being used. The Prosecutor General's office is processing 11 criminal proceedings under Article 441 on ecocide of the Criminal Code of Ukraine. In November, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, told the G20 summit that the recognition of ecocide and the protection of the environment were among 10 key proposals in the Ukrainian formula for peace. Independent of the government, conservation groups have mobilized and repurposed themselves to gather evidence. Ukraine's biggest environmental NGO, Eco Action, has collated reports of more than 840 incidents and collaborated with Greenspace to plot them on an interactive environmental damage map. Using satellite images, they have measured and highlighted the biggest physical impact. Let's take a look. Oh, this is the environmental damage in Ukraine during the full scale of war 2022. This is the interactive map. Everybody gets the link because it's worth checking out. Kakhovka water level decreasing. Due to the damage by the occupiers to the shut-off gates of the Kakhovskaya HPP, the water level in the Kakhovskaya reservoir has decreased, which leads to the drying up of the tributaries and the death of hydrobionts. First image shows comparison in water level for almost same dates between last and current year. Second image shows decline of water level during several months. This map is incredible. This is really good. Trenches in Red Forest. During the occupation in February-April, the military activity in Red Forest, possibly radioactive contamination, caused soil disturbance from the beginning of the invasion until the end of March. Really good map. So, if you have the time, I really encourage everybody to get acquainted with this map and to share it with as many people as possible. And actually, possibly also share this segment as well. Among them are the attacks on industrial centers such as Odessa, Donetsk, and Lviv, which released billowing clouds of benzoprene, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and other toxic chemicals. War has also sparked vast forest fires, particularly in the Luhansk Oblast, where 17,000 hectares of forest have been charred. Of greater concern for humans at least is Europe's biggest nuclear plant at Zaporozhye, which has suffered fires, damage to power lines, and now faces a threat to its cooling system from the low water levels in the Kakhovka reservoir, which we have actually, incidentally, I think, looked at. Interestingly enough, we have just read about it. You know? Both sides have caused damage to water systems, but Russia was the initial aggressor and has gone much further in targeting industrial facilities and residential areas. Yes, don't believe people that say that Russia does not attack residential areas. It absolutely does. It attacks kindergartens, hospitals. Russia absolutely does target residential areas. It absolutely does. Theaters, kindergartens, hospitals, apartment complexes, of course. Of course. So, we continue. Yulia Ovchenkova, a Ukrainian MP who serves on a parliamentary environment committee, has launched an appeal for international recognition of Russia's environmental crimes, which led to the Council of Europe adopting documents on ecocide. She's looking for more support from overseas lawmakers. She says that more than 2 million hectares of forests have been destroyed, wrecking ecosystems and putting at risk rare endemic species such as pearl cornflowers, which can be found only on sandy steppes on the outskirts of Mykolaiv, or the bear tree, which grows in a narrow area of the Stone Graves Reserve in Donetsk. The war, she said, had made people realize the value of nature in a new way, as well as providing ecosystem services such as fresh water, clean air, and fertile soil. Ovchenkova said that the country had a greater appreciation of the security benefits of places such as the Policia, Europe's largest holdout of wild nature, which is a natural protective barrier of hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of forests, swamps, floodplains, lakes, and wet meadows. Similarly, when Russian troops attacked Kiev early in the war, the detonation of a dam of the Irpin River created a swamp barrier against their advance. Other impacts are indirect. In both countries, industry and agriculture lobbyists are using the crisis to push for looser protections for nature and open up more land for development. Manufacturing of missiles and other weapons causes pollution and emits carbon dioxide, as do explosions and fire they ignite. The war is so far responsible for 33 million tons of CO2, and post-war reconstruction is estimated to generate another 48.7 millions of tons. This belies the oft-stated idea that nature benefits from humanity's misfortune. That may have been true in the past. In isolated no-go areas, wildlife has flourished. In the heavily mined, demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, and until the Ukraine war started, the contamination zone around the site of Chernobyl nuclear disaster, but there is no such upside in a hot conflict. Even Chernobyl's former sanctuary status has been eroded. Russian troops dug trenches in the local, raising concerns that they might have unearthed radioactive soil. Most abuses of nature go unreported in the media. See, the media does not really report on this either. I don't see any streamers that report on the war talk about this either. So most abuses of nature go unreported in the media. The hot conflict is very active and thus higher rates of damage. Yeah. Nature is suffering. The environment is the silent victim of the war, said Olena Masiukiewska, an environmental economist. As a member of a working group to calculate compensation, she's trying to address this and believes a restoration tax should be levied on Russian oil or Russian oligarchs as part of any peace deal. For now, though, the fighting, burning, and polluting continue, as does the effort to measure the horror. The researcher Polyanska plans to get back on the road in spring after the winter snow have thawed. When the war is finally over, she hopes reconstruction can be used to improve as well as restore Ukraine. I hope we can do things in a more ecological way. We need more green technology in industrial centers, and perhaps there are some dams that we shouldn't rebuild. We need deep scientific study. Other campaigners are also looking forwards. Denis Tsutseyev of Greenpeace said Ukraine needed mechanisms and resources for nature restoration. It's an essential part of improving the health of people who suffer from the war and getting back to normal life. There we go. So I think this is very important to talk about. This is very important to report on, to discuss. If you like this segment, if you think this sort of thing is valuable, then press like, subscribe for more stuff like this, maybe hit the notification, and I will see you next time. Boom.